Dear colleagues, the next item of business this afternoon is the debate on the report titled Application by Kosovo for Membership of the Council of Europe. The documents under the numbers 15958 and 15957, presented by Mrs. Dora Bakoyannis on behalf of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy. We will then hear from Mrs. Azadeh Royan, who will present an opinion on behalf of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights under the document 15964. We will also then hear from Mrs. Beatriz Fresco-Rolfo, who will present an opinion on behalf of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination, document under the number 15965. In order to finish by 8 p.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 7:10 p.m. to allow time for the reply and the vote. I call now Mrs. Bakoyannis, the rapporteur. Dear Dora, you have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to reply to the debate. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, for the next couple of hours, we will be touching upon a deeply complicated issue, entrenched with particularities and nuances we might have never faced before in the Parliamentary Assembly. But again, this very reason might be precisely why there could be no better place to discuss this issue than here. This year, the Council of Europe celebrates 75 years of existence. For the last 75 years, the Council of Europe and its Parliamentary Assembly protect and promote human rights, democracy and rule of law in Europe and beyond. Our aim has been to create a solid, safe zone in which all European citizens would have the chance to take shelter when their rights were violated or suppressed. It was with those principles that I approached the report we are voting on today, as appointed rapporteur to the request of the Committee of Ministers for the Assembly's opinion to Kosovo's application. 301 days, 2 fact-finding visits, 4 different sessions of information updates to the members of the committee, and more than a dozen meetings across Europe later, I'm standing before you with the confidence that no stone was left unturned in the preparation of this report. As requested by the Committee of Ministers, this report is dedicated to the assessment of human rights, democracy, and rule of law in the region. Since the very beginning, I have been adamant that the report will take no stand on statehood. The recognition or non-recognition is and shall remain a prerogative of states. With that in mind, allow me to provide you with a brief overview of my work with the invaluable support of the committee's secretariat. On their report, which was submitted to the Assembly's Bureau on the 17th of November 2023, the eminent lawyers stated that despite significant shortcomings in the implementation, Kosovo's legal rules are generally in line with international standards. Kosovo can be regarded as a functioning parliamentary democracy with strong guarantees for the independence of the judiciary and fundamental rights and freedoms entrenched in the Constitution. The lawyers mentioned that the extension of the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights to Kosovo would contribute considerably to the improvement of respect of human rights. As a result, from a legal standpoint, Kosovo complied stricto sensu with the basic requirements of the accession to the Council of Europe. Nevertheless, given the worrisome and on many fronts deteriorating situation of human rights in Kosovo, especially with regards to minority rights, I wanted to ensure that the authorities in Pristina are prepared to proceed with the essential reforms for the effective protection of all Kosovan citizens. I identified three main outstanding issues on which urgent action was needed, namely, the implementation of Kosovo's Constitutional Court decision on the Visoki Dečani Monastery, the illegal land expropriations of the Serbian minority properties, and the establishment of the Association of Serb-Majority Municipalities. Throughout my engagement with the file, the entirety of relevant international stakeholders, from state representatives to NGOs and region experts, warned me that no progress is to be expected in any of the aforementioned issues. Yet, through consistent and persistent work endorsed by the unwavering support of the political committee, real progress has been made. I stand today before you proudly to inform you that the Parliamentary Assembly has managed to resolve what was identified by the eminent lawyers as the most important case of rule of law violation in Kosovo. The implementation of the decision by Kosovo's highest court, pending since 2016, which restored the property of the most important Serbian Orthodox monastery in the region, represents a great victory for the rule of law, the property rights of Serbs, and the religious rights of a minority community. And it was celebrated as such by the abbot of the monastery, the Serb Father Sava. In contrast to the case of monastery, the issue of land expropriations is a process. No single act can ensure the effective protection of minority communities from illegal land expropriations. This is why we committed Kosovo to ensure that expropriations are conducted in the strictest respect of the law and that any future legislation in this area will be fully in compliance with their constitution, including with regard to the protection of the properties of the Serbian Orthodox Church. This commitment, together with a long list of Council of Europe conventions, is now signed by the authorities of Pristina. As a result, in case the Committee of Ministers decides to accept Kosovo's membership, any case of illegal expropriation of land will be subject to the control of the European Court of Human Rights. Finally, allow me a couple of words on the Association of Serb-Majority Municipalities, which is probably the most important open question of minority rights in Kosovo and a major point of friction between Pristina and Belgrade. Since the very beginning, I made clear that I regard the establishment of the association as a unilateral domestic issue of Kosovo, which impacts only Kosovan citizens. With that in mind, I put every effort towards its materialization. Unfortunately, this issue could not be negotiated in a vacuum. This is because since 2013, the establishment of the association has been the cornerstone of the EU-facilitated dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. In fact, the recent Ohrid Agreement of 2023 explicitly mentions that any negotiations for the establishment must take place, and I quote, within the EU-facilitated dialogue. As a result, the association is regrettably out of reach for the moment, even if the Committee of Ministers is highly encouraged to take this issue into consideration. Dear colleagues, based on all aforementioned factors, it is my opinion that the Parliamentary Assembly shall recommend that the Committee of Ministers invite Kosovo to become a member of the Council of Europe. I hope that today the Parliamentary Assembly will underline the need to bring under the democratic umbrella of the Council of Europe 2 more million Europeans, protecting them from violations that put their lives and well-being into question as we speak. Allow me to close my intervention on a more personal note. Ever since the report became public, I have received strong criticism and in some cases personal attacks for the way I handled the file. The most aggressive comments have been made by representatives of member states that do not recognize Kosovo. To those, I would wholeheartedly wish the courage to be honest, because in reality, their issue never was if and which preconditions were imposed to Kosovo. There could have been no precondition upon the satisfaction of which these members would have supported a positive report, for the simple reason that their objection has nothing to do with the accession criteria that my report examines. They object to the very idea of a state of Kosovo and thus the eligibility to even consider accession. This is an objection I understand, and it would be much more courageous from their side if they had decided to stay at that. I repeat it again. The report is not taking any stance on statehood. This was clearly not required by the Committee of Ministers, who preserved their exclusive right to decide on the matter. Should I have been obliged by the Committee of Ministers to express my opinion on statehood, should the Committee of Ministers require my or our opinion on statehood, I would have never taken the report, and I would align myself with the current position of Greece. If that was the case, that would have been my guidance and approach to the report. But, dear colleague, this is not the case. It never was. I hope this speaks a lot about my integrity and the extent to which I'm prepared to go in order to defend my ideas. I have done so consistently in the last 10 decades, and I'm proud that the members of the Parliamentary Assembly recognized those features by selecting me for this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dora. I now call Mrs. Rosen for the opinion from the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights. You have 3 minutes.
Dear colleagues, the accession of Kosovo to the Council of Europe will strengthen peace and stability in the still fragile Balkan region. Most importantly, it will extend the protection of the European Convention on Human Rights to the people of this young country. And it would help to further strengthen the rule of law in the interest of all inhabitants, no matter which ethnic group they belong to. The draft statutory opinion of the Political Committee recognizes that Kosovo fulfills all the conditions for membership in the Council of Europe. The Legal Committee supports this conclusion and adds some further explanations. In particular, Kosovo has finally resolved the issue of the property rights of the famous Dekani monastery, a condition on which all 3 rapporteurs insisted. The constitutional and legislative framework of Kosovo is in fact quite advanced, not least because Kosovo has cooperated intensively with the Venice Commission and generally followed its advice. This said, some legislative reforms are still needed, and the practical implementation of the legal framework must be improved. The commitments made by Kosovo, as well as our additional recommendations, are tools that Kosovo has at its disposal to further improve the protections enjoyed by all its citizens. I deliberately stress all its citizens, because the fair treatment of the minority groups, including the ethnic Serbs living in the north, will be crucial for the future success of Kosovo as a free and prosperous country. As rapporteur for the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights, it was my role to look a little closer into the legal issues raised by the Kosovo's accession and to come up with constructive proposals for further strengthening respect for human rights and the rule of law. The list of suggestions listed in the first amendment of the Legal Committee speaks for itself. The explanatory memorandum provides some background for each of these proposals, in light of the eminent lawyer's report and the findings I made during the fact-finding visit to Kosovo. Dear colleagues, we should not forget that accession to the Council of Europe is not the end. but the beginning of a process. Is not a trophy that can be put away in a showcase, but a source of obligations who proposes it to improve the lives of each and every person living in Kosovo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Rosen. I now call Mrs. Fresco-Rolfo for the opinion from the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination. You have 3 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Bakoyannis's work. I'd like to thank her for this report, not forgetting Mrs. Rojan, with whom I carried out a fact-finding visit in December. I'd like to thank the Kosovan authorities and our colleague parliamentaries for their welcome and their precise answers to our questions. According to my mandate, I focused on issues of equality and non-discrimination. The Constitution of Kosovo, in its Article 3, guarantees the protection of the rights of communities, recognizes that Kosovo is a multi-ethnic society made up of the Albanian community and others, governed democratically in the full respect of the rule of law through its legislative, executive, and judicial institutions. The participation of representatives of non-majority communities to political life and institutional life is one of the cornerstones of the protection of minority rights. I'd like to echo Ms. Bakoyannis's appeal to create the Association of Serbian Majority Municipalities, which is essential, a first step towards sustainable reconciliation. This is a commitment that must be achieved in order to show that Kosovan Serbs' rights are respected and taken into account. I'd like to underline that representatives of civil society in Gračanica have told me that they lacked hope and faith in institutions, that they felt dehumanized over the past few years. The fight against hate speech and the promotion of reconciliation are intimately linked to the protection of minority rights and must be prioritized. A strategic approach of the linguistic issue is necessary with the effective implementation of the law on the use of languages, including at local level, which might restore faith in institutions. As far as education is concerned, it is essential that all school children are able, regardless of the language taught in their school, are able to make progress, and that disabled children are also supported. I see that women participate actively in political life, but unfortunately the official rate of female employment is very low, around 14%, and the authorities are actively working to tackle this. The translation of the Istanbul Convention in the Constitution shows that Kosovo is determined to fight against gender-based violence, even though the fight against child marriage could be intensified. Unfortunately, the draft updated civil code, which was foreseen in order to recognize civil partnership between same-sex couples, has not yet been put on the agenda of the Assembly. But I'm confident that the government intends to do so. I will be following the situation of transgender people, and I'd like to thank NGOs working on the protection of rights of non-majority communities, gender equality, the fight against gender violence, LGBTI rights, and the rights of disabled people who have supported the drafting of this opinion. By accepting this accession, the Council of Europe would be sending a strong message to support civil society, and I think we will have an ally who will support the efforts towards greater reconciliation. This will be an opportunity for non-majority communities to know that their rights will be better protected and their concerns addressed. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Fresco-Rolfo.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fresco-Rolfo.
Of the speakers on behalf of the political groups, I will give first the floor to the leader of ALDE, Mr. Julian Boulay.
Thank you, President, dear all. My grandparents were born in the Kingdom of Romania. My parents and I were born in a communist republic. My children are born in a democracy. Countries and regimes change, people stay. And looking around in this assembly, I noticed that actually more than half of the members present here have been born in countries that do not exist anymore. Therefore, our fight is not for countries, but for individual rights. This is a historical day from a liberal point of view. We are defending rights of individuals, not of countries, not of ethnicities. Today's decision means more rights to 1.6 million people who lived the war, whose wounds are still healing and who are obliged to build a new future together. Today's decision is a starting point, and we expect Kosovo to deliver on the agreed reforms and on the international engagements. Kosovo is ready and deserves to enter Council of Europe. At the same time, Kosovo has to ensure a proper protection of the Serbian communities. That being said, we should not go into the wrong path of possibly creating a new Republika Srpska in north of Kosovo, but we should not either ignore the real need of the Serbian minority to be respected and included in Kosovo. I want to thank the presence of both the Serbian ambassador, but also of the Kosovo's ambassador. It is very important, it's a good signal to have both of you here. So I'm very thankful for that. I want to thank, of course, everyone for your presence. And I want to say on behalf of the Liberal family that I trust the wisdom of the Committee of Ministers to take the right decision on the future of 1.6 million of people, not countries, not ethnicities. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. I now give the floor to Mr. Alexis Tsipras, who will speak on behalf of the United European Left.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I want to thank Mrs. Bakoyanni for her report. There are different positions in this hall, including in my own group of the left, on whether or not Kosovo accession in this period contributes to the goals of the Council of Europe. As you may know, I have fought for peace, stability and growth in the region of Balkans. And from this experience, I have at least learned two things. First of all, that there are no easy solutions for peace. All decisions that take us forward are difficult and have a political cost. Fighting nationalism has a cost. Fighting inaction has a cost. The second thing I have learned from my experience is that this cost is worth it because it can make the difference between war and peace. Frozen conflicts do not stay frozen forever. If issues are not solved on the basis of international law, stability is undermined day by day, and nationalism grows until the conflict becomes violent again. A strategy of delaying negotiations and kicking the can down the road is good for political careers, but it comes at the cost of people's lives, it comes at the cost of their future. So I agree that today the accession of Kosovo is on the table, and this has created a dynamic for action. And on this basis, Kosovo has at last decided to implement the decisions of the Constitutional Court on the Desani Monastery. But I want to be clear that this cannot be enough to support accession. Since Kosovo's application, we have seen very serious escalations, some because of Belgrade, but also some because of the decisions of Pristina. Most importantly, we need actions in relation to the law on expropriations and good faith proposals on the establishment of the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities, including a roadmap. We cannot build peace on abstract commitments. Finding a common diplomatic ground in resolving differences that protects at the same time your national interests is a difficult path, but it is the only path for our common future. It is the only path of a country that is truly strong and believes in its future. Politicians have to have the political will for progress, even if it means sacrificing a part of their political capital. I have spoken several times to Prime Minister Kurti, who I believe has very important political capital with his people that he should use, as I have spoken at the same time several times with President Vučić in Serbia, who also can use his political capital for a breakthrough. This is the only way peace is built in a region. This is the way peace is built in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexis. I now give the floor to Mr. Frank Svabe on behalf of the Socialist Democrats and Greens, the leader of the group. Mr. Svabe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is a historical moment. Dear colleagues, dear women and men of Kosovo, I know how you like more to say Kosovo, and dear Dora Bakoyannis, I really have to thank you very much for this report, and I have to thank you very much for your wisdom, your power, your courage, and as we know as chairs of groups, your persistence. At the end, all this makes this progress possible. And I know that you face all kinds of criticism from different actors in different phases of preparing of the report. I'm very sure that you was the best choice and you make this progress possible today. So thank you very much for this. Efcharisto. It's a unique organization we have to represent here, one of the best in the world. We are not the UN Secretary, the UN Security Council. We are not the General Assembly of the UN, and we should not play it. We are not here to recognize countries and not to recognize countries. We have to create a geographical space of respect of democracy, rule of law, and human rights in a bigger Europe. And we have enough gray zones meanwhile, but if there is a part of the organization, a part of Europe, a country prepared to put around 2 million people under the umbrella of this organization, I think we should agree. Kosovo made a lot of progress in the last years, but a lot is to do, and Dora Bakoyannis addressed it in her report, including the establishment of the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. But one progress was made, and this is the monastery Dečani, and I would like to thank all of them who made this progress possible, including the monastery itself. This is not everything, but it is an important step, and we should really value it. The Committee of Ministers, the governments, ask us for our opinion on the request of Kosovo to become member in this organization, and we will give our answer, a clear answer today. And it's a clear message. There is no reason then not to decide in May in the ministerial on this request. This Council of Europe, with our own values and rules, we have our own dignity. And please do not mix it with other institutions. We are not the European Union. We are not the Quint group. They have some reasons, but we have our reason ourselves, and we are quite proud that we could reach something with our rapporteur what others could not reach till now. But this membership is not a tool for negotiations. We have our own logic, and we have our own value in a membership ourselves. I ask you to support the very balanced report and reject the amendments which would risk this balance. Let's give a very clear signal with a two-thirds majority or even more to our governments, to the Committee of Ministers. Let's welcome Kosovo in the Council of Europe.
Thank you, Frank. I give now the floor to Mrs. Ingrid Skau, She will speak on behalf of the EPP group. Ingrid, you have the floor.
President, EPP would like to start by thanking Mrs. Dora Bakoyannis for her report and draft opinion. We know that she and her team have been working hard and diligently. Thanks to her efforts, we can have a well-founded debate here today. To many in this room, this is a difficult and sensitive question. So also for members of the EPP group. We do not have a unified position in this question. I therefore welcome the debate and look forward to hearing the various positions. Bakoyannis' report is both thorough, detailed and balanced. It sheds light on the various aspects of Kosovo's application for membership of the Council of Europe. Both the positive and impressive developments regarding democracy and rule of law, as well as the remaining considerable challenges, are addressed. Norway was among the first countries to recognize Kosovo as an independent state, and since then, President, we have supported Kosovo's efforts towards European integration and membership of the Council of Europe. After visiting Pristina in September last year, I agree with the opinions and acknowledgement of the progress made by Kosovo in the areas of human rights, democracy and rule of law. Kosovo has taken important steps towards a well-functioning democracy. However, the list of expectations and commitments to fulfill is long. I would like to, in particular, mention the establishment of the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. Prime Minister Albin Kurti has confirmed to Mrs. Bakoyannis that he is ready to sign the draft statute on the establishment of Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. It is our clear expectation that this will happen shortly and without any necessary delays. If or when Kosovo becomes a member of the Council of Europe, the country will be under the PACE monitoring procedure. Some of our member states and countries here have been subject to this procedure for years and still are. This is unfortunate. Membership is not an end stop. It is the beginning of a new and binding road. It is my conviction and expectation that Kosovo will embrace this road and work hard to move on from the monitoring procedure status as soon as possible. I hence call on you all to support Mrs. Bakoyannis' draft opinion. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Igert. Before I give the floor to the next speaker, I want to announce you that the ballot for electing 3 judges to the European Court of Human Rights is now closed. The counting of votes will take place under the supervision of the tellers, Mrs. Buska, Mrs. Eder Gitzthaler, Mr. Kern, Mr. Gevorkian, and Mrs. Tselenk-Ezen. I invite them to go at once to meet in the room set aside for this purpose. The results of the election will be announced, if possible, before the close of today's sitting. And I now give the floor to Mr. Zsolt Nemet, who will speak on behalf of the European Conservative Party. Mr. Nemet, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The ECR in principle supports Kosovo becoming the member of the Council of Europe. We appreciate the efforts of the Kosovar people in the past decades towards democracy and Europe since the fight of Ibrahim Rugova. However, we have 3 reasons why we cannot support the report in front of us. The 3 reasons are the following. The first one is that Kosovo has not fulfilled its own commitments. Only 1 out of 3 commitments, and I would like to draw the attention especially to the creation of the Association of Serbian Municipalities. This has been an integral part of the Ahtisaari plan, and since then, all peace plans relating to Kosovo. Unfortunately, Kosovo has failed to implement it, and I have very serious doubts that if we give up this opportunity, the Kosovo government will never allow the creation of the Association of the Serbian Municipalities. Dear colleagues, there are amendments in this question. EPP colleagues, there are amendments in this question, and I'm just curious why you are not supporting them. We want to see Kosovo as a strong democracy. The second reason is Serbia. Disregarding legitimate Serbian interest is endangering the international stability and the internal stability of Serbia. I would like to ask whose interest is to destabilize a country, whose interest is to let a country out of the Parliamentary Assembly, similarly to that of Azerbaijan. I don't think it is the interest of our organization. And thirdly, the Council of Europe, I believe, under present circumstances, goes against its own principle. The Council of Europe should serve regional stability with a wise, diplomatic, and mediating role. The PACE, the Committee of Ministers, should act together. I hope that the Committee of Ministers is going to be a bit more wise than us colleagues. I hope that we will be able to convince Kosovo that the Association of Serbian Municipalities is essential to Council of Europe membership. I hope that we will be able to keep Serbia on board inside the Council of Europe in order to continue its integration to different European structures. And I hope that we will be able to maintain the leverage of the Council of Europe vis-à-vis for the regional stability of the Western Balkans. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, dear Zsolt. I now open the list of the speakers. It was Mr. Zsolt, Mr. Nemeth was the last speaker on behalf of the political groups, and the first in the second list is Mr. Enis Kervan. Please, colleagues, keep the time limit.
Thank you, dear President. Dear colleagues, as a representative of Kosovo, I stand before you today with a heart full of hope and determination. Before I delve into this topic, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the rapporteur, dear Dora, also dear Azadeh and dear Beatrice, for their outstanding work and unwavering dedication. Additionally, I want to express gratitude to all of you and those who have contributed to making this moment historic for both Kosovo and Council of Europe. Kosovo has made remarkable progress in fulfilling all the criteria for membership in the Council of Europe. We have diligently upheld the principles of the rule of law, democracy, and human rights, with a strong commitment to protecting the rights of national minorities. Our legislative framework sets high standards in line with the European standard to safeguard and promote the rights of all national minorities. We promote tolerance, dialogue, and reconciliation in line with the international standards such as the European Convention on Human Rights, Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, and the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages. Moreover, our Constitution guarantees the protection of economic, political, cultural, religion, languages, education, and media rights for all national minorities. In addition to legal protections, national minorities have significant representation in key decision-making bodies, including the Assembly, the government, the justice system, and local government institutions. Dear colleagues, in marking of the 75th anniversary of the Council of Europe's establishment, I urge you cast your vote in favor of the report prepared by the Honourable Ms. Bakoyannis. Membership of Kosovo in Council of Europe is not merely a symbolic gesture, it is a tangible step towards ensuring access to justice for all our citizens. The European Court for Human Rights represents a beacon of hope, offering a higher level for protection for the rights of all communities in Kosovo, especially for minorities, and I say this as a representative of one of the national minorities in Kosovo. I want to conclude by urging each one of you to consider the significance of your vote. By supporting Kosovo's accession to the Council of Europe, you are not only endorsing our aspirations for European integration, but also reaffirming the principles of justice, equality, and human dignity. Your vote will pave the way towards a brighter future, where Kosovo stands proudly within the European family, where the rights of all individuals are fully respected. Dear colleagues, today Kosovo awaits your endorsement for inclusion in this esteemed community. Let us unite, embracing Kosovo's multi-ethnic diversity as an integral part of this big family. Thank you.
Mr. Piero Fassino is next.
Thank you, Mr. President. I speak Italian. Intanto io vorrei
I'd like to start by thanking Dora Bakoyannis. This has not been straightforward work, as has been mentioned, and it seems to me that Ms. Bakoyannis' report is a balanced and far-sighted one, and correct in the indications that it suggests, the political indications, directions. We're talking about a complicated matter here, ladies and gentlemen. We know the background, and we know how much Kosovo has suffered, and we know that Kosovo is part of the Western Balkans that, for so long, have seen a high level of conflict. In 1995, we saw the Dayton Agreement, and the countries that emerged from that war were promised integration in Euro-Atlantic institutions, the EU, NATO, and the Council of Europe, as the framework in which they would be able to emerge from a long phase of conflict and to gain stability. And in 2003, the EU enlargement agreement confirmed that prospect. So did the opening of the NATO to a number of countries, and all the Western Balkan countries are members of the Council of Europe. And that seems to be the starting point that we need to use. We need to stabilize the Balkans, because for a long time, from 1995 until today, that is long enough for a lot of instability to have emerged. When we think just how many governments there have been in Montenegro and the fragile situation in North Macedonia, we think of the problems from the point of view of democratic development in Serbia, which is also a country that on numerous occasions has seen countless elections, and we can see that the situation in the Balkans is very far from being simple. And of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina is the most complicated of all. We need to offer stability, and Kosovo is an opportunity to offer stability to the region. And I think that the choice that we are making here, approving a resolution that requests that the Committee of Ministers admit Kosovo as a member of this organization, is fully in keeping with that prospect. And I say to our Serbian friends who are opposed to this prospect, think about it carefully, because Kosovo, which is part of the Council of Europe, will mean that all the citizens of Kosovo, including those in the Serbian minority, will be able to be better protected. They will be able to appeal to the tools of the Council of Europe, including the ECHR. I also think that the accession of Kosovo into this assembly could help us, as long as we accompany these two countries, could also help the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina in order to normalize relations. This is necessary to ensure stability in both countries and in the Western Balkans as a whole, for which reason I think it is quite right to open our doors to Kosovo, requiring that the authorities in Kosovo should keep to the commitments into which they have entered, as Dora Bakonis has sent out, the very large number of conventions that they will need to accede to and implement, and also the association of Serb municipalities. This is a precondition, but we must bear in mind that we mustn't give rise to the circumstance of a new Republika Srpska, because we've seen what an impact this has had in Bosnia-Herzegovina. It has been an ongoing factor for instability, and hence the importance of the association of Serbian municipalities, but within the legal framework, which is that of the unity of Kosovo, and Kosovo as part of the Council of Europe will be part of the efforts that our Assembly can undertake to ensure the stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Piero. Next is Mr. Knut Abraham.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. We have an excellent report here by Dora Bakoyannis, and I think we should all be very grateful to you. This is an incredibly impressive work you have done. Dear colleagues, we had eminent lawyers, rapporteurs from different countries, some who recognized Kosovo and some who didn't, different political groups and different committees. All arrive at the same conclusion, with strong support and based on facts, that Kosovo deserves, and the people of Kosovo deserve, the protection of human rights that joining the Council of Europe offers. That's what it's all about. I hope for strong support in this assembly today. By that, we also send a strong message, a strong signal to the Committee of Ministers to take a positive decision on Kosovo's membership this May. This message I personally will take to Berlin, and I hope that all of you will take it to your national capitals. Let me highlight one key issue, and this is, of course, the protection of minorities in Kosovo, in particular, the Serbian minority of Kosovo. It makes no sense to deny them access to the instruments this institution can offer. Rapporteurs, monitors, and especially the most remarkable human rights court in the world, the European Court of Human Rights. Dear colleagues, Serbia stated in the Ohrid Agreement of last year that, I quote, it will not object to Kosovo's membership in any international organization, says the Ohrid Agreement. In return, Kosovo committed, I quote again, to ensure the security of the property of the Serbian Orthodox Church. And we are happy, and we've heard it already, it did so in the long unresolved Dečani monastery issue. Kosovo also committed to, I quote again, ensure an appropriate level of self-management for the ethnic Serb community. This is a reality since Kosovo's constitution was adopted, which gives 10 Serbian majority municipalities full and exclusive powers in many areas already today. But Kosovo committed to do more, and this is good. But this cannot be an excuse now to delay its deserved accession. Dear colleagues, let's make this important step now, here, and today. Thank you.
Mrs. Nerea Hedo is next. Mrs. Ahedo.
First of all, allow me to thank Mrs. Bakoyannis for her work, the work presented before the Chamber today. Since Kosovo declared its independence, my political party, the Basque Nationalist Party, has been supporting it. We think it was a triumph of freedom and democracy, and we believe that this was also the triumph of the free decision of the citizens of Kosovo, and therefore we should respect that, and of course respect the rights of minorities in Kosovo. All of their rights should be respected. The Kosovo would like to become a member of the Council of Europe. It seems to me that it meets all the requirements and its legal framework is adapting to this situation, although there are still questions to be resolved. As the report says quite rightly, its membership of the Council of Europe would strengthen human rights, consolidate democracy, and of course the citizens of Kosovo would have access to the European Court of Human Rights, a major achievement. We therefore would support this path, and we will be supporting the recommendation to be submitted to the Committee of Ministers inviting Kosovo to become a member of the Council of Europe. We look forward to this integration, and I really think that this will be yet another way of supporting stability and peace within the area. Mrs. Bakoyannis has said, and she's absolutely right, that the report doesn't speak about the quality or what a state actually means. But of course we have to remember that there are certain situations where you've got countries that have not recognized Kosovo as a state, including the Spanish state has not recognized Kosovo as a state. I don't quite understand that. I don't really know what the reasons for that might be or what the excuses might be for this non-recognition of statehood, bearing in mind that the independence of Kosovo does not actually violate the provisions of international law. There are also similar cases within the state of Spain. We still have unresolved territorial issues that have not yet been sufficiently settled. I'm talking about Catalonia or indeed my own region, Euskadi, the Basque country. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to say that we need to resolve these issues, but we need to do so whilst fully respecting the decision of the citizens. They have free will as peoples, of course, always through dialogue and always through agreement. Regarding the subject matter of this report, therefore, what I would like to ask is basically an appeal for those who have not yet recognized Kosovo as a state. Please do so. Kosovo should be fully recognized as a state. Why? Because this would be a way of respecting the decision taken by the citizens of Kosovo, which to me seems crucial, and in addition to that, it would help stability and peace in the region. Thank you.
Mrs. Blerina Gilametti is next.
President, dear colleagues, let me start by thanking the rapporteur, Ms. Dora Bakoyannis, and the two eminent lawyers, the honorable committees and other organs of the Parliamentary Assembly for their contribution in preparing the final draft opinion on Kosovo's request for membership to the Council of Europe. Today we stand at a pivotal moment in history, not just for Kosovo, but for the very ideals that the Council of Europe upholds. As we consider this request by Kosovo, we are not merely deciding on an opinion for a membership application. We are affirming our commitment to the principle of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Kosovo's accession to the Council of Europe is not just a symbolic gesture. It is a testament of recognition to the progress made by its people towards building a society that reflects our shared European values. A vote in favor of this opinion is a vote for enhancing the rule of law in a region that has seen the ravages of conflict and the challenges of rebuilding. It's a vote for bolstering democracy in a young nation that has shown resilience and determination in its democratic journey. And also it's a vote for advancing human rights for all the citizens of Kosovo, ensuring that every individual, with no distinction of nationality, live with dignity and freedom under the umbrella of this organization. In these times of uncertainty, as we witness Russia's aggression against Ukraine, a vote for Kosovo is a vote for stability and prosperity in the Balkans and beyond. It is a clear message that Europe stands united, that we are stronger together, that we will not waver our support for those who seek to join our community of nations, a community of shared values. Let us not forget that the Council of Europe was founded on the ashes of the war, with the vision of a continent united in peace and solidarity. Today, as we face new challenges, let us rekindle that vision, but welcoming Kosovo into our fold. Dear colleagues, I urge you to cast your vote in favor of this draft opinion for the Committee of Ministers on Kosovo's request for membership. Let us embrace this historic opportunity to strengthen the fabric of European unity and to build a future where every nation can thrive in peace and harmony. Thank you.
Mrs. Biljana Pantic-Pilja is next.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Bakoyannis, I wish to congratulate you for what you are doing today, because you will go down in history as someone who in the most brutal manner violated all the norms of international law and the principles upon which this organization is founded. You have decided to trample on international law and admit into the Council of Europe something that is not a state, by passing all procedures. Ms. Bakoyannis, you clearly stated that so-called Kosovo had to meet 3 conditions, and that only then would you give a positive opinion. The first and fundamental condition is the establishment of the community of Serb majority municipalities, which is an international commitment prescribed 11 years ago by the Brussels Agreement. The establishment of the community of Serb majority municipalities in the basic precondition for the Belgrade and Pristina dialogue. Remember, if you allow so-called Kosovo to join the Council of Europe without prior establishment of the community of Serb majority municipalities, the community of Serb majority municipalities will never be established. It was you, Ms. Bakoyannis, who said and wrote, and I quote you, "The establishment of the community of Serb majority municipalities is considered to be a necessary condition for an effective protection of national minorities' human rights." I will repeat to you what I told you at the political committee, because I have courage. You have demonstrated that you lack the integrity you evoke and that you are hypocritical. The Statute of the Council of Europe affirms that only a European state in which there is a rule of law and respect for human and minority rights may become a member of the Council of Europe. Why then do you not talk about the human rights of Serbs? Ever since Kurti's regime has been in power in Kosovo and Metohija, the persecution and ethnic cleansing of the Serbian community have been ongoing. A mass exodus is happening. Almost 14% of Serbs have left Kosovo and Metohija. Serbs experience ethnic attack on a daily basis, and you do not care. Pristina authorities are arresting, intimidating, shooting, and robbing Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija. For 10 months, Serbian goods have not been allowed to enter Kosovo and Metohija. Boards with place name in Cyrillic script have been taken down. The use of the dinar has been banned, threatening the livelihood of the remaining Serbian population. No one has been held accountable for the attempted murder of 2 Serbian boys last Christmas. And you have decided to reward all this unilateral action by Pristina with visa liberalization, admission to NATO, and finally admission into the Council of Europe. What you are doing is a precedent by which you will open Pandora's box. You have provided that territorial integrity and sovereignty mean nothing to you, and maybe precisely one of your states is next, and will follow this precedent that you have created in Serbia case. The status of the southern Serbia province, Kosovo and Metohija, clearly regulated by the UN resolution 1244, and Kosovo and Metohija will always be part of Serbia. We may be a small country, but unlike you, we have integrity and we will never surrender and submit. Serbia will consider whatever it wants to be a member of an organization that flagrantly violates international law. Živela Srbija!
Dear colleagues, I remind you that under the rules of procedure and code of conduct for members of this assembly, debates must be conducted in a civil and orderly manner, and that members of the assembly must not do anything which might cause a disturbance during proceedings. I'm just reminding it to you, to all of you. Dear colleagues, Next speaker is Mrs. Maja Vukicevic.
President, dear colleagues, I have already pointed out that I will not support the report and Kosovo's membership. Since Montenegro did recognize Kosovo as a state, there was a lot of talk about my vote, but as you already know, as MPs, we all have the right to decide for ourselves. Regarding the delegation of Montenegro, there will be votes both for and against. I am here to be the voice of those people who voted for me to be their representative in the Parliament of Montenegro. For us Serbs, no matter where we live, Kosovo is a cornerstone of our religion and our history. I do agree that we need to look forward to try to build bridges of cooperation, but my opinion is that we are not helping the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina by forcing Kosovo's membership in the Council of Europe. I must say that I am surprised with the rush to finish this process, especially if we know that all requirements haven't been met. We have some promises that something will be done, but the question is when and if it will be done. I have read the opinion of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights regarding this issue, but the fact is that there is no consensus in the international community that Kosovo is a state. The fact is that the majority of members of the United Nations General Assembly do not recognize Kosovo's independence. 12 member states of the Council of Europe, including 5 member states of the European Union, don't recognize Kosovo as a state. Moreover, if you look at those facts, we cannot really say that it is a territory that is not disputed. And if we are talking about territory as a characteristic of the state in international law, it is also very important how that territory was acquired. Never in the history of the Council of Europe has the application of a disputed territory been considered, let alone that it has been approved for membership. There are some important facts that we need to have in mind when we are talking about Kosovo's membership in the Council of Europe. Territorial integrity and the existence of the Resolution 1244, prejudicing the ongoing negotiations between Belgrade and Pristina, and the risk of creating a precedent. We must treat the territorial integrity of all sovereign countries equally, because if we don't, it can come back to all of us like a boomerang. My opinion is that there is no need to force this process because it can have many harmful consequences. The role of the Council of Europe should be to contribute to dialogue and reconciliation, and if Serbia decides to lead the organization, we will only make the situation worse. Nevertheless, I do hope that the Committee of Ministers will make a responsible decision. Regardless of the decision, I wish peace and prosperity to all people living in the territory of Kosovo. Thank you.
Mr. Oleksiy Goncharenko is next.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to thank Dora Bakoyannis. You did a great job. You knew from the beginning that you will be attacked for this report. And you did a courageous step, and you made a great report. Evharisto, thank you very much for doing this. I want to congratulate Kosovo. I am sure now there will be a positive decision. And really, Kosovo deserves it for 100%. That's a very great moment, not just for Kosovo, not just for Balkans, but for all of us. Because the free world should unite. The free world should unite. Now tyrannies and empires are trying to take a revenge. Just watch what's going on. Putin trying to rebuild Russian empire. Just watch that he is in offensive now. Watch what's happening now in Georgia, where just now, right now, Georgian parliament is considering the so-called foreign agents law, which is a copy of Russian law. And people of Georgia are furious about this. By this, Russia is trying to take Georgia from Europe. That's something we shouldn't give them this possibility. Just watch what's going on in Balkans, where Russia is trying to put an oil to the fire and to have a big fire in Balkans and big war there. We are doing now a step against this, because when there are gray zones, it's always very dangerous. Kosovo shouldn't be the gray zone. Kosovo should be a member of the Council of Europe, in future member of European Union. Kosovo është e Europe, and that is true. And we need to go further. We need to help all other countries. Look, watch at Moldova, which is today attacked in hybrid way by Russia, trying to influence this country of Council of Europe. Watch what's going on in the Middle East, where these axis of chaos, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and standing behind them China, are trying to have a fire there, as big war as possible. Watch what is done by proxies of Iran. We can see it, Houthi, Hezbollah, Hamas, how it's everything dangerous. And the only answer is to be united now, to unite all the free world. Kosovo wants to be a part of free world and deserves to do this. We need to do our step today, and this is very important. And the last but not the least, I want to address Serbia. Just watch at other countries, at history. We were happy to work together with democratic Serbia, but you will never rebuild Serbian empire. In Balkans, it's impossible anymore. And in general, there is no place in Europe for empires anymore. No Russian, no any other. Just stop this revanchism. Just turn this page and be with us, and let's build together. Just stop these connections with Putin and other dictators. Stop playing games with them. These will only lead you to a poverty, to problems, to chaos as you have it today. Just stop this, move ahead, work together with your neighbors, with all European countries. Let us be strong enough to stop all the tyrants in our continent, and together we will do this. Because our values are really our strength. I really believe in this. Great day. Kosovo është Europe.
Next is Kimmo Kiljunen. Kimmo, you have the floor.
It's on. Mr. President, thanks very much for Dora Pekoyannis for this excellent report. As Alexander Koncharenko just mentioned, you took a serious challenge and you made an excellent, good report. You kept your integrity very clearly, and it's a balanced one for all of us to assess. Clearly, Dora, you were a bridge builder. You tried to find issues where we can share views, opinions, and have a somewhat consensus. You try to seek solutions instead of controversies. We have witnessed enough controversies in Kosovo, in Western Balkan, actually in Europe as a whole. We need that type of minded, how to find a common line and compromises at the end. Mr. President, I'm coming from Finland. I listened very carefully what the representative from Serbia and Montenegro just spoke, and I can understand what they are stating, although have a little bit different emphasis and different approach for the problem. Finland is a small country, and we ask by nature for self-determination of all small nations. But as Dora Bakoyannis in her report states, this report is not about statehood. This report is about human rights. Council of Europe is a human rights organization, and the question is about the access of close to 2 million Kosovians for our families, for our basic human rights conventions, court here, appeal courts, etc. That's the issue of this report. It's a little bit the same like we made 2019 over Russians, when they renewed their credentials here, the same idea, how to get Russian people part and parcel for our human rights family. Unfortunately, we know the results. I will vote for this report, but I will not vote for statehood, Kosovan state. I will vote for Kosovian people and their rights. So I would say welcome Kosovians to our common family, Council of Europe.
Next is Monsieur Lemillon.
Mr. President, thank you. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank our three rapporteur colleagues for their report and their opinion, which will feed into our debate today. It's not every day that our Assembly is asked to give an opinion with a view to the possible accession of this country to the Council of Europe. So this is a particularly important meeting, even though it will be for the Committee of Ministers to take the final decision. This is a very special demand, this request of Kosovo to join the organization, because not all states recognize Kosovo, and the resolution put forward by Dora Bakoyannis does underline that its possible accession does not prejudge the position of any other member state vis-à-vis Kosovo. This is a fundamental issue, naturally. Her report underlines the magnitude of the work that Kosovo will have to do, especially on 3 points. First of all, setting up the association of Serbian majority municipalities, the implementation of the judgment of the Constitutional Court on the Dečani monastery, and the respect of basic legal safeguards in the field of expropriation. I'm pleased to see that the pressure exercised by PACE throughout this process has achieved progress. The Kosovo government has announced that it recognized the rights of property, the property rights of the Dečani Orthodox monastery on the 24 hectares of land surrounding it, putting an end to a dispute that has been ongoing for 20 years. A referendum will be organized on the 21st of April with a view of revoking the 4 Albanian mayors elected last year in Serbian majority towns in Kosovo. This will ease tensions. And of course, the relations between Serbia and Kosovo are at the heart of our preoccupations, and we do not want a worsening of the situation, the security situation in northern Kosovo and across the Western Balkans, which is why it is essential that Kosovo uphold the commitments undertaken by the President, the Prime Minister, and the President of the Parliament. The creation of the Association of Serbian Majority Municipalities, as well as the respect of basic legal safeguards in the field of expropriation, are very sensitive issues on which we can expect progress. And I think maybe the first steps could be taken even before the Committee of Ministers examines this request. This would be a very strong signal and much appreciated. I'd also like to underline the importance of minority rights. The accession of Kosovo will, in my opinion, be a very positive point for all people living in Kosovo who will be able to apply to the European Court of Human Rights, which is why I will be voting in favor. Thank you.
Mrs. Arta Bilali Zendeli is next.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear President, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, there have been many meetings, sessions, debates, committees since yesterday that created a feeling to all of us that this April session will have a joint theme, and it is going to be the membership of Kosovo in the Council of Europe. Being an ethnic Albanian from North Macedonia, of course that allows me and makes me feel this theme as a very important one for Albanians, for the region, and last but not least for Europe itself. I understand, but I don't agree with opinions of a kind that this membership will create new conflicts in Europe. But I also cherish very much the positive report of Ms. Dora Bakoyannis and 2 positive opinions of our colleagues, Ms. Beatrice and Ms. Azadea. Thank you, ladies. Dear colleagues, was this organization founded and formed to stop the wars between or among people in Europe? We all agree that yes, the answer is yes. Therefore, comments like This membership will provoke further wars, further conflicts in Europe. Does not sound good and does not share a good taste among us because are, a contrario, are opposing the main purpose and the main goal of a Council of Europe. Also, all democratic states and organizations calls on dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. In my opinion, this membership will boost and will foster this dialogue because at least now we will have two equal parts within the table, within the dialogue. And equality is a core value of Council of Europe as well. Former Minister for Europe and European integration of France in 1999 said, if there was a Nobel Prize for freedom, it would be delivered to family Ashari from Prekaz in Kosovo. A family whose 56 members were murdered during the war within one single day. Dear colleagues, that Nobel Prize was not delivered to family Ashari, but by supporting this report and those opinions, we all will deliver to their homeland a chair, a place in the big European family, in the big European table, the place where do they actually belong. Thank you.
Mr. Armen Gevorgianis next.
Mr. President, Europe has traditionally tried to skip drawing parallels between Kosovo and other unrecognized entities that aspire to exercise their right to self-determination. Republic of Artsakh, for example. Such a selective approach to self-determination and its application has become one of the key sources of instability on the continent. Instead of turning into a source for international order and justice, it became a blunt instrument for geopolitical shifts. Both Kosovo and Nagorno-Karabakh in the early 90s had equally legitimate right to exist. They used to be autonomous entities within socialist republics. The whole absurdity of the present situation lies in the fact that as a part of totalitarian Soviet Union, Nagorno-Karabakh had autonomous status and self-governance, while in era of democracy and wider European framework, it remained unrecognized and its indigenous people were ethnically cleansed from their own native lands. Whenever the international community is unable to achieve a legitimate and a comprehensive resolution on the right of self-determination, we then inevitably face crimes against humanity. Meanwhile, selective approaches and double standards deepen the chaos and uncertainty in international relations, stimulate authoritarian trends, and downgrade the democratic standards. Dear colleagues, we Armenians will need to reset and start many things anew. In the first place, we need to tell the new and future European political elites about the roots of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and draw parallels with Kosovo case. The membership of Kosovo in Council of Europe may give hope to the Karabakh Armenians for some future on their own historic homeland. If Europe today shows strong will to adopt a new framework for the protection of Kosovo independence, I believe same Europe should find opportunities to facilitate a collective return of Armenians to their historic homeland in Nagorno-Karabakh. The Council of Europe has to join the European Parliament in efforts to help them to determine their political future and to exercise their own democratic self-governance under firm international security guarantees. I hope that the Council of Europe, while strengthening Kosovo's independence, can also reaffirm its commitment to the protection and preservation of fundamental political rights without a selective approach. The right of return of Karabakh Armenians is not only a matter of justice and human rights, but also essential for promoting peace, stability, and reconciliation in the region. The historic, cultural, and religious heritage of Armenian people in Nagorno-Karabakh cannot be lost, and this issue shall not be abandoned. Thank you.
Mr. Branislav Borenovic is next.
Dear Chairman, dear colleagues, today I will first ask you one question so that you think carefully. What kind of decision would you make if a part of your sovereign state unilaterally decided to declare independence against your will and consent? And if today you are deciding on the membership in the Council of Europe or of such a breakaway part of your country, imagine that. By putting on the agenda the reception of the so-called Kosovo to the Council of Europe, today we are witnessing a drastic example of the collapse of international law. Here, in the heart of Europe, the cradle of democracy, we are witnessing a terrible attack on basic democratic principles. With this procedure, you trample on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of a member country of the Council of Europe and the member country of the United Nations, Serbia. This is, I have to say, a world record in violation of democratic principles and international law, because you want expressly, in just 1 year, to enable membership in this body of a territory of Kosovo and Metohija, unilaterally seceded from a sovereign country, Serbia. That territory is not recognized by more than half of the world, and is not and cannot be a member of the United Nations as an independent country. I remind you, the Pristina authorities, in their unilateral actions, do not act according to the assumed international obligations and violate international agreements. We know that Pristina has done absolutely nothing to fulfill the key conditions from the Brussels Agreement, that is regarding the establishment of the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. And you are doing all this at a difficult time, when relations between Belgrade and Pristina are trying to be normalized with difficulty and negotiations. Gentlemen, you are setting an incredible precedent, a historical, harmful precedent, and you are collapsing the institution of the Council of Europe. I ask you, are you creating a new rule with this precedent? Are you sending a message today to Catalonia, to Scotland, Northern Italy, South Tyrol, Flanders, to many parts of Ukraine? Are you sending a message to my Republic of Srpska and Bosnia and Herzegovina, to the Southern Cyprus, that is possible unilaterally declared independence and be admitted to the Council of Europe? We will know from the outcome of today's vote, and time will tell what the consequences will be. Let me say in the end, right away, that I will be against this proposal, and I will repeat, without the consent of Serbia, it is senseless, unreasonable, inappropriate, and absurd to make such incredible decisions. This is a paradox and a shame. The only way to save the honor and image of this institution is to reject this proposal, or for the key precondition for any consideration to be implementation of agreed agreements, formation of the Association of Serbian Majority Municipalities. Thank you.
Mr. George Lukaidis is next.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to start by thanking our esteemed colleague, Madame Bagoyannis, for the opinion that she presented to us today. Dear colleagues, when discussing Madame Bagoyannis' positive opinion on Kosovo's accession to the Council of Europe, we should ask ourselves, under the present circumstances, will making Kosovo a member state of the Council of Europe serve the purpose of peace, stability and security on our European continent? Will the European perspective of the Western Balkans be bolstered or weakened by such a development? Will it not have knock-on consequences for the whole region, already volatile in terms of minority rights and territory? Will getting Kosovo in the Council of Europe solve internal tensions, or, on the contrary, will it exacerbate them? Furthermore, dear colleagues, we should ask ourselves if such a development will lay the ground for more tension, hate and nationalism and violence, as we already tragically witnessed in 2023. We must also take into consideration the legitimate concerns of the Serbian side that has repeatedly called the Assembly to take stock on Kosovo's negative record as regards the respect of minority rights and its failure to establish the Association of Serb-majority municipalities. Leaving all these outstanding issues to be addressed after accession, it's not the right thing to do. Without prejudice to the positive steps that have been taken, and we have to acknowledge them, the authorities in Kosovo, prior to accession, must speed up reform and establish the Association of Serb-majority municipalities and ensure that expropriations are conducted in full compliance with law and the Ahtisaari plan. Otherwise, Kosovo's accession, without the prior obligation to meet these benchmarks, will act as a disincentive to proceed with the necessary reforms. Furthermore, dear colleagues, the integration of minority Serbs into the government architecture, as well as tangible progress on the EU-facilitated dialogue aiming to achieve a comprehensive, legally binding normalization agreement between Kosovo and Serbia is essential. Without normalization, the accession of Kosovo to the Council of Europe will be, in our opinion, at least a major mistake. Secondly, allowing Kosovo to become a member state of the Council of Europe and thus departing from the status-neutral position of the UN sets a dangerous precedent for other secessionist entities, establishing total violation of international law and in violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. Political solutions must be sought in conformity with the norms and principles of international law. The Council of Europe should continue to strive to establish deeper ties with Kosovo, mainstream standards and activities that will improve the lives of the people in terms of human rights, the rule of law, and democracy, including minority rights. Status over standards will jeopardize this goal. Thank you.
Mr. Arben Gassi is next.
Dear colleagues, I stand before you today not only as a representative of Kosovo, but as a voice of justice, democracy, human rights in our region. The question before us is not merely one of the membership, but is a question of recognition, of solidarity, and of the fundamental principles that bind us together as members of the European family. For too long, Kosovo has been denied its rightful place among the nations of Europe. For too long, our people have suffered the indignity of exclusion and the pain of injustice. But today, we stand before you as equals, ready to take our place among the community of nations. Membership in the Council of Europe is not just a matter of political significance for Kosovo. It is a matter of moral imperative for all those who believe in principles of democracy, human rights, and rule of law. It is a recognition of the progress we have made in building democratic institutions, fostering inter-ethnic harmony, and promoting the rights of our citizens. But our journey is far from over. We still face challenges, obstacles, and adversaries who seek to undermine our progress, to undermine our existence. We remain committed to the path of freedom, the values of tolerance and dignity, and to the vision of Kosovo that is free, democratic, and inclusive. 35 years ago, based on these Council values, our founding father, Ibrahim Rugova, started a journey of democracy, rule of law, and independence. We got a reply from Serbia with violence, killing, atrocities, but we did not stop because we believed in your support. With your support, we had our freedom. With your support, we build our country. With your support, we will be part of this organization. Today, I ask each and every one of you to stand on the right side of history, to stand with Kosovo, and to stand for the principles that define our European identity. Let us stand and send a clear and unequivocal message to the world that Kosovo belongs to the Council of Europe, that our voice deserves to be heard, and that our rights must be respected. I urge you to vote in favor of Kosovo's membership in the Council of Europe. Let us not only affirm our commitment to the democracy and human rights, but also demonstrate our solidarity with the people of Kosovo as they strive to build a better future for themselves and generations to come. Thank you very much.
Time is over. Mrs. Fiona O'Loughlin is next. Fiona.
Thank you, Mr. President. During our progress report yesterday, I took the opportunity to say that one of our priorities this week should be the adoption of a very clear and unequivocal position on Kosovo's request for membership in the Council of Europe. In Kosovo, they've been working on this for 16 years through adversity and difficult times. And Saranda and Arban are testament to that. As it stands, Kosovo's citizens lack a fundamental tool to protect their human rights. The European Court of Human Rights is, of course, the final court instance available for European citizens whose countries are members of the Council of Europe. And presently, the Kosovan citizens have no access to this. So we could say that their citizens are fundamentally second-class citizens compared to their peers in the Balkans and wider countries in our continent. Kosovo has already become a member of the Venice Commission and the Council of Europe Development Bank, which has been a great asset in improving the living conditions for the vulnerable and the marginalised in Kosovo. Thank you, Dora, for your incredible work, and I absolutely support it. We should extend the protections of the ECHR to the citizens of Kosovo, while also ensuring that the government of Kosovo uphold their obligations and their responsibilities, which obviously will be part of the Monitoring Committee's work. I commend the report and I recommend its adoption. We are witnessing at the moment, unfortunately and sadly, the backsliding of democracy in some countries. And we should absolutely support Kosovo's application by extending the strengthening hand of democracy to them. If the Reykjavik summit was not for this, what was it for? It is not enough to merely defend democracy. To extend it is to strengthen it. Solidarity with Kosovo. Thank you.
Mrs. Petra Bayer is next.
Thank you very much, dear Doros. The decision we hopefully will take tonight it was mentioned, it is a start and not the end of a process. And of course, Kosovo still has to do a lot of work to improve the human rights situation in the country. What is for clear that the beneficiaries of this process at the end will be the citizens of Kosovo, because they will be protected by the European Court of Human Rights. They will enjoy all their human rights under the umbrella of the European Court. And Kosovo has still something to do, and some issues were mentioned. I would like to focus on domestic and gender-based violence, which is all enshrined in Beatrice's report. And when we have a closer look, then we see that Kosovo already amended its constitution with all the contents of the Istanbul Convention. That's really a very strong commitment to combat gender-based and domestic violence, and I really want to congratulate. There are cooperation projects with the Council of Europe on reinforce the fight on gender-based violence. There is already an evaluation going on about the implementation of the obligations of the Istanbul Conventions with the methods of Grevio, but not by Grevio. And the result is that on the one hand, there is not enough resources for survivors of gender-based violence, especially of those who are seeking shelters. And there is a lack of comprehensive sexuality education at school, which could act as a very important prevention tool to violence. There is a national strategy plan, which a lot of awareness-raising programs, and since the beginning of this year, the Kosovo also works with perpetrators of sexual violence. And what is one of the problems that still have to be tackled is a lack of trust of those who survived, a lack of trust both in police and in the justice system that often hinders them to report cases. And of course, training is imperative. So in the light of what I've said, it's surprising that Kosovo did neither sign nor ratify the Istanbul Convention so far, and I hope that it's only a formal next step that will follow, and then we can welcome Kosovo also in the Istanbul Convention. And what I'm really looking forward to is the day when we can welcome the MPs of Kosovo here in this assembly, not just as observers, but when we can welcome Saranda, Enis, Arben, Besnik, and Ariana as equal partners here in our assembly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petra. Madame Seda.
Mrs. Gören-Böhlich is next. Thank you, Mr. President. Dear members of PACE, for 75 years, the Council of Europe has been defending the values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. The Council has always encouraged the reconciliation and good neighbourhood relations between European countries, fostered multilateralism, founded on international law. And thanks to this approach, the Council has grown stronger with each new member, reaching more and more Europeans and fulfilling its fundamental mission. After 17 years, we are today talking about a new step in this direction. I wanted to offer our support to the accession of Kosovo, to Kosovo joining our family as a part of Balkans and of Europe. As one of the first countries to recognize the independence of Kosovo, we believe that there's no turning back from this. We will continue supporting initiatives for Kosovo to be recognized in an increasing number of countries, and so it can take its place within regional and international fora. Ensuring peace and stability in Kosovo is of crucial importance for the peace and stability in the Balkans. And in this context, we will continue our efforts in order to maintain peace and stability in Kosovo, especially in the context of KFOR, the NATO force in Kosovo, having taken over command in October. As a part of the Balkans, Turkey has always supported the Euro-Atlantic integration of all Balkan countries, including Kosovo, and their accession to international fora, especially the Council of Europe. Because we recognize that this is a crucial step, not only for Kosovo, but also for the prosperity and the development of the whole region, and in particular for the preservation of peace and security in the region. We believe that the problems mentioned in the report should not be seen as an obstacle to the accession of Kosovo to the Council of Europe. I think we can foresee that the accession of Kosovo will contribute to solving these issues, but that will have a positive impact for all communities in Kosovo. Dear members of PACE, I believe that Kosovo has come a very long way since its creation when it comes to the respect of fundamental values, and it will go even further when it is a member of the Council of Europe. And in this context, I welcome the commitments undertaken by Kosovan authorities at the highest level. It is in this belief that, as a parliamentarian of Kosovan origin, I wholeheartedly support the favourable opinion expressed in the report on the accession of Kosovo. I would like to recall once again that as part of the Balkans, Turkey will always play a decisive role for the development and the prosperity of the region. Thank you for your kind attention.
Mrs. Elisabetta Gardini is next.
Sì, grazie.
Yes, thank you, President. I would like to thank all those colleagues who are working on a very sensitive and complex issue. This is why I would like to thank Dora Bakoyannis, our rapporteur. She has undoubtedly spent a great deal of effort on achieving this aim. The aim is in keeping with our Assembly, because today we are voting on the request of Kosovo to accede to the Council of Europe, this request presented by the government of Kosovo. As an Italian, I would like to recall that Italy was one of the first countries to recognize Kosovo just a few days after its declaration of independence, and Italy has always supported its Euro-Atlantic aspirations, for which reasons we have always been in favor of Kosovo becoming a member of the Council of Europe's family, because we are supporting democracy, human rights, and also our European cultural identity. But we're also here to suggest solutions where problems arise. And therefore, on the one hand, we are in favor of the accession of Kosovo, but we would also like to make sure that this accession takes place as part of a process which unites us and doesn't divide us, and provides and ensures greater union in our organization and not greater conflict. Let's recall that globally we are going through a very difficult moment in history, lots of regional conflicts, and we know that it doesn't take very much for a conflictual situation to spread. And we know that there are external actors and influences in these regional conflicts at times. So in this spirit, we have submitted a number of amendments. They were rejected in committee this morning, but we'd like to see them evaluated, because we want to ensure that there is a dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia and Kosovo. I don't want to put one before the other. And as an Italian, I appeal to both parties, because we have sought to underline the commitments into which Kosovo has entered, the Brussels and the Ohrid agreements, and also the commitment to an association of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo. And Kosovo has stated that it will uphold this, and I can resubmit this when we come to the vote. I have mentioned this because we didn't have the opportunity I didn't want this to be seen as an obstacle, but also as a commitment which would be more clearly expressed than in the initial draft of the rapporteur. What we want to do is contribute to a proper framework for normalization of relations between the two countries that have been so difficult for years. And we've seen tensions in this very assembly, and we've seen that they are gradually declining, but they haven't yet been eliminated. We want to do something to achieve this kind of harmony. Thank you.
Mbasa is next.
The decision we take today may seem complex, but it's in fact one of the simplest calls we have to make. Kosovo already enjoys some of the benefits of the Council of Europe. It enjoys the expertise of the Venice Commission. Teams of our colleagues, members of this Parliamentary Assembly, observe its elections. Yet, it does not enjoy the full benefits, such as the protection that the European Convention of Human Rights gives to all its citizens, and its minorities in particular, such as the support that the Congress of local authorities gives to local government, and in particular municipalities inhabited by Serb minority. So the question is, do we allow the citizens of Kosovo to enjoy these benefits or not? This is the question on which we vote today. One would have presumed that, in particular, those who proclaim to have at heart the interests of Serbs of Kosovo would line up to be the first ones to demand that this act be taken as soon as possible. And in fact, thank Dora Bakoyannis not simply for an objective report, not simply by fortifying their aspirations to give this support and this protection to members of Serb minority in Kosovo, but also thank her for making true on something that they have been demanding for more than 8 years, such as the case of the execution of the Constitutional Court decision on the issue of the monastery of Dečan. Or is there something else at play? In September last year, a Crimea-like scenario unfolded in northern Kosovo. It was not an isolated incident. It was not a sporadic undertaking. It was a well-funded, well-prepared paramilitary incursion to grab territory and dictate de facto partition of Kosovo, very much similar to what happened in 2014 in Crimea. And this is part of a vision that has a label. It's called the Serb world. It includes the secession of Republika Srpska, the overcoming of the political infrastructure of Montenegro, and it goes counter to everything we stand for and we believe in. That is why voting for Kosovo's membership in the Council of Europe is the utmost normalization act as far as peace and stability in the Balkans is concerned. These are two opposing views, but it has to be the view that protects the values we stand for that prevails. And for those who are concerned that a lot needs to be done in each of our countries. That's why we are here, to promote, to supervise, to monitor, to reprimand, and to make sure that all our countries stay on the path of the values of this organization. Thank you.
Monsieur Pierre-Alain Fridet, you have the floor.
Mr. Frides, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, here I have a map that you're familiar with. It's a map of Europe, a map produced by the Council of Europe showing all its member states. And there are 3 countries missing, Belarus and Russia, and we know why. And there's this little speck in the middle of the Balkans, Kosovo. The people of that region do not enjoy the protection of the European Court of Human Rights, and this is something that needs to be remedied. There has been a long conflict between these groups with a lot of tragedies and suffering. I am a doctor, so in Switzerland there are many people from former Yugoslavia who live in my country, and I have Serbian patients, Kosovan patients, and through what they tell me, I have gained some perspective on the suffering that these people have been subjected to. I have been to Kosovo twice, on 2 occasions, in the framework of a parliamentary mission to KFOR, and I got some idea of the tensions on the ground. I went to Mitrovica, and I've seen across the banks of the river there the tensions between the various population groups that unfortunately do not mingle. And for me, the only solution is to go high. Both the Serbian population and the Kosovan population must win. And for that means accession to international organizations, accession to the Council of Europe. And I think it is their aspirations in long term to join the EU. And this will go through a normalization in their relations. It will be achieved through good relations with their neighbors and ensuring security for all these populations. This will mean economic development, better living conditions, and this is essential. These people want peace, they're entitled to peace, they should have peace, and it is through the international community that these people will be able to enjoy the dividends of peace. The long path to peace must start today, And I call on you to accept this report, to accept this proposal, and I'd like to congratulate its authors. I really want to say that here we don't want to choose between Kosovo and Serbia. We want to work with Kosovo and with Serbia because we are Europeans. We want peace and unity. Thank you.
Mrs. Elvira Kovacs is next.
Thank you, distinguished chair, dear colleagues. As noted earlier, the readiness of a candidate to join the Council of Europe shall be assessed only on the strict criteria, which are based on fundamentals, principles of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. The member states of the Council of Europe shall endeavour to respect human and minority rights and good governance standards to develop and promote pluralist democracy. However, in essence, when we are talking about Belgrade and Pristina relationships, we are facing at least 4 or 5 parallel realities. Reality of Serbian people living in Kosovo and Metohija, reality of Albanian people, governmental realities, even reality of international reports and resolutions. The question is, at which point do these realities converge? Undoubtedly. The focal point is the everyday life and security of the ordinary citizens. As it is stated in PACE Resolution 2368 from 2021, preserving national minorities in Europe, a number of challenges are endangering the capacity to protect the rights of persons belonging to national minorities in Europe. In that sense, the twin challenge for the authorities with diverse population is how to build societies in which minorities are not merely tolerated but respected and perceived as an equal and integral part. Madam Rapporteur, let us know about the list of measures to be undertaken by Pristina as a response to the recommendations of the eminent lawyer's report, which also includes positive steps towards the inclusion of national minorities. But we cannot forget that since 2022, in the Serb-majority municipalities of Leposavić and Zubin Potok, Pristina authorities have initiated land expropriation cases for 118 parcels of land. According to international organizations, including the EU, EULEX, the OEC, and the United States have expressed deep concerns about these decisions, arguing that the procedure did not comply with Pristina's own laws and regulations. However, the fundamental question that must be resolved, which has already been agreed upon in the past, is the association of Serb-majority municipalities. Beside the fact that paragraph 11 stated that the Assembly considers that the establishment of the association should feature in the Committee of Ministers' future consideration of Kosovo's application in accession to the Council of Europe as a post-accession commitment for Kosovo, it is obvious that the establishment of the intermunicipal association is not a requirement by the Council of Europe standards, but in case of Pristina, the establishment of the Association of Serb-majority municipalities is an international obligation and the most concrete way to ensure the effective protection of the Serbian community in the northern municipalities. By establishing this community, all other problems should be received. It was said that Kosovo would be monitored in the post-monitoring period to see if it fulfilled the obligation, but what is the guarantee that the authorities in Pristina will implement their obligation when it is obvious that they have not implemented it after 11 years since the Association of Serb Municipalities was agreed? Also, how can Pristina authorities be trusted to implement reforms within the framework of the rule of law when Kurti and Osmani stated in public that they were returning property in Dečani Monastery only because of their membership in Council of Europe? Thank you.
Thank you, Elvira. Monsieur François Bonneau has agreed with Mrs. Saranda Bogujevski to change their positions. So she will speak now, and then we will have Mrs. Dunia Simonovic-Bratic, and then I will close.
Monsieur le Président.
President. Said that you are going to change the place that you are going to speak, isn't it? No. No, okay, you can go on then.
As you want.
Monsieur François Bonneau, you have.
Monsieur le Président.
President, dear colleagues, some debates are of particular importance, and that is clearly the case today. We are looking at the request for accession by Kosovo. The unusual feature of this of Kosovo is that it's not recognised by all member states of the Council, which is why it's important to underline that any accession by Kosovo will not preempt the position of each and every member state of the Council vis-à-vis the status of Kosovo. We need to say that in order to tackle it. The particular nature of this request is the troubled background of the Western Balkans, the scarring of wars and the collapse of the ex-Yugoslavia. And we must therefore be responsible and attentive to the equilibrium in the Balkans. We must take account of the painful history and the rights of majority, whether they be Serbs, Albanians, Bosniaks or Croats, depending on which country we're talking about. The stability of the Western Balkans is a major challenge. And we know that some countries there are subject to interference from outside powers. Dora Bakoyannis notes that the accession of Kosovo would have some positive effects because it would consolidate the process of European integration of Kosovo. It would guarantee access to the ECHR for all people in Kosovo, including the Serb minority, and it would mean that the Council of Europe would be able to ensure fuller monitoring of the situation of nationalities and would be able to apply all its tools. A recent agreement has been achieved on the Dečani monastery, but there are two problematic points which persist. On the one hand, the creation of an association of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo. This is a long-standing commitment by the Kosovar government as part of the EU dialogue. There's also the question of upholding basic legal guarantees on the matter of expropriation. We are aware of the delicate balance of our colleagues' proposal, but also conscious of our role. We are going to be adopting an opinion. It will be for the Council of Ministers to validate it or not. The authorities of Kosovo gave the rapporteur a list of clear commitments. They indicated in particular that all future legislation on expropriation will be completely in keeping with the Ahtisaari plan, especially when it comes to the protection of Serbian Orthodox Church property, and that the draft law on property expropriation submitted to the Kosovo Assembly will be amended as a result of this as quickly as possible. Kosovo also commits to undertake major steps to implement all the articles of the Brussels Agreement and the Ohrid Agreement. This means the establishment inter alia of an association of Serb-majority municipalities as soon as possible. Kosovo's Vice Prime Minister confirmed this morning the absolute determination of the Kosovar authorities fully to implement these commitments in this area. This as soon as possible, if it were to mean steps before the next Committee of Ministers meeting, that seems to me that it would be a welcome and important signal. Thank you.
And Mrs. Dunja Simonovic-Bratic now.
Well, dear colleagues, we came to the end of the road. Decision of supporting this report from the vast majority of this Assembly shows to us from the Republic of Serbia that you really think that it's quite all right to break all rules and procedures only to establish your will and power regardless on law and justice. This morning on the Political Committee, we saw your ignorance and the lack of any objectivity. All amendments that we tabled on the committee was rejected. Almost anonymously, MPs who talked against our amendments did not even find some better explanation than this great wisdom by saying it's not logic. Very original, I must add. Now, let me remind you what is not logic, as you said to us. First, the rapporteur broke all procedures while she was preparing this report. She changed her opinion daily. First, there were 3 requests for Kosovo membership. The day after, new draft, and from 3 we came to 1 request. And that request was just a symbolic one. Bringing back land to Monastery Visoki Dečani. We were listening from rapporteur that she is a Greek Orthodox, but that the establishment of the Serbian Association Municipalities and the law of expropriation are crucial. Now, I agree with the rapporteur. Only this symbolic become now crucial. And Serbian people who live there and suffer every day under the regime of Albin Kurti, whose ministers are now here, are cancelled in this report. It was more important for you to embrace the amendment for LGBT than saving lives of Serbian children. And that is not everything. This report is a downfall, not just for all values that Council of Europe stands for. This is a downfall of common sense. Finally, this is a downfall of Europe that once a lot of people dreamed of. In Serbia, we all feel the same. If you let Kosovo in, you are rejecting Serbia. You are expelling Serbia. Are you sure that this decision is an easy one? Everything will change. The president of reception of the territory that has no recognition as a state in UN will encourage all separatist movements in every single country. How will you deal with that? Who will be a terrorist and who will be a liberator? Those questions will get you soon, so be prepared for the days to come. Finally, I want to show my gratitude for those brave women and men who supported us in this hostile atmosphere towards Serbia. That was really not an easy task. And at the end, please mark my words, because they are words of all Serbian people. Kosovo was Serbia, Kosovo is Serbia, and Kosovo will always be Serbia.
Dear colleagues, I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that the typewritten text can be submitted electronically if possible no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. As the rapporteur, Mrs. Bakoyannis, decided to use her total speaking time at the beginning of the debate, I invite the chairperson of the committee to take the floor. Mr. Buick, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le...
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, the Political Affairs Committee's adoption on the 27th of March of the draft opinion recommending Kosovo's accession to the Council of Europe presented by Ms. Dora Bakoyannis has logically been followed by a discussion here in plenary. The agreement, the opinion, if it is adopted, will then be submitted to the Committee of Ministers that will take the final decision in May and will decide whether or not to place this issue on its agenda. This is what lies before us. 3 obstacles have clearly stand between Kosovo and its accession. Firstly, Kosovo's compliance with the decisions of its own constitutional court, in particular the decision on the Deceni monastery, because a land dispute stood between the Kosovo authorities on the one hand and the monastery on the other. The Constitutional Court found in favour of the monastery, but the authorities took a long time to implement the court's decision, but that has now happened. Kosovo's government announced on the 13th of March this year that it recognises the property rights of the Deceni Orthodox Monastery to 24 hectares of land that surround it. This is a very good example of what the accession to the Council of Europe can entail in terms of significant progress on rule of the law. Next, the law on land expropriation. This must take place in keeping with the Constitution and with Kosovo's legal norms, and it must be explained to the general public where expropriations are necessary and why, and it must take into account the ethnic background, in particular Albanians and Serbs. And finally, the question of Serbs living in the 4th northern municipalities around Mitrovica, given that following the boycott by Serbs of the recent municipal elections, the 4 municipalities have Albanian mayors. There was a very low level of politician. After months of crisis, this led to an armed attack in Banjska in September 23. There are going to be elections, however, on the 21st of April next, and we will discuss the establishment of an association of Serb-majority constitution, the first step being made towards this. In this debate, it's important to take into account the point of view of the Serbian representatives here. We're not seeking to cause one group to win and the other group to lose. We're seeking to create a balance, an equilibrium, and to reconcile populations in this region that has been scarred by history, and we're seeking to offer everyone a European perspective. The debate is open, and I hope, as chair of this committee, that it will be a fruitful one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buix. Now I have the honor to announce to the Assembly the results of the election of the judges. Election of a judge to the European Court of Human Rights for Ireland. Total number of members voting, 181. Number of spoiled or blank ballot paper, 4. Number of valid votes, 177. Absolute majority of the votes cast, 91. The votes were cast as follows. Mr. Fergal Gaynor, 9. Mrs. Yuna Ni Raiferartaig, 164. Mr. Colm Osineide, 4. So, Mrs. Yuna Ni Raiferartaig, having obtained an absolute majority of votes cast, is elected judge of the European Court of Human Rights for a term of office of 9 years, which shall commence not later than 3 months after her election. We congratulate her. Election of a judge to the European Court of Human Rights for Latvia. Total number of members voting, 181. Number of spoiled or blank ballot paper, 5. Number of valid votes, 176. Absolute majority of the votes cast, 91. The votes were cast as follows. Mr. Artus Cooks, 141. Mr. Yannis Neimanis, 5. Mrs. Daiga Rezevska, 30. So, Mr. Artus Cooks, having obtained a majority of votes cast, is elected judge of the European Court of Human Rights for a term of office of 9 years, which shall commence not later than the 3rd of September 2024. We congratulate Mr. Cooks. Election of a judge to the European Court of Human Rights for Liechtenstein. Total number of members voting, 181. Number of spoiled or blank ballot paper, 2. Number of valid votes, 179. Absolute majority of the votes cast, 91. The votes were cast as follows. Mr. Alain Sablé, 82. Mrs. Marie-Louise Geheter Alge, 13. Mrs. Catherine Reiter, 84. No candidate having obtained an absolute majority of votes cast, a second round will take place. The second round will take place tomorrow. So, we continue. The Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy has presented a draft opinion to which 15 amendments have been tabled. They will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. I understand that the chairperson of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 11.1 and 12 to the draft opinion, which were unanimously approved by the committee, should be declared as agreed by the Assembly. Is that so, Mr. Buix?
Oui, c'est le cas, monsieur.
Yes, that is the case, President.
No one object. As there is no objection, I declare that Amendment 11.1 and 12 to the draft opinion have been agreed. Any amendment which have been rejected by the committee seized for report by a 2/3 majority of the votes cast shall not be put to the vote in plenary and shall be declared as definitely rejected unless 10 or more members of the Assembly object. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 2, 3, 4, 5, 13, 15, 9, 14, 10, 6, 7, and 8 to the draft opinion which were rejected by the committee with a two-thirds majority be declared as rejected. Is that so, Mr. Briggs?
Oui, c'est le cas, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, President, that is the case.
If no one objects, I will consider the amendment to be rejected. Is there an objection? Is there an objection? So the request of the committee is rejected, so the amendments will be taken individually in the order in which they appear in the compendium. I now call Mrs. Dunia Simonovic-Bratic to support Amendment 2. You have 30 seconds.
Progress. Human rights died on Kosovo and Metohija for Serbian people. They shoot on children on Christmas. What rights when you cannot go to the church if international forces don't protect you? They attack even graves and dead people. It is totally insane to talk about progress in Kosovo. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to support this amendment? No, sorry. Does anyone else wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Zbabe.
Mr. President, thank you very much. For sure, progress is in Kosovo. Everybody stated this. And unfortunately, you don't, let's say, welcome very much the rights of LGBTI people like you make sure in your speech before. So progress is reached, and we should have more progress, but we should speak about the achievements already. So I ask you to vote against the amendment.
The committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority, and I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 2 is rejected. I call now for the amendment number 3, Mrs. Dunia Simonovic-Bratic, to support the amendment. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. This is also unacceptable. We all know how long in domestic legislation must take time to exhaust domestic legal remedies and finally reach the European Court of Human Rights. That means that the first case would be before court only after maybe 10 years or 100 or never. Furthermore, Serbian people are arresting on false charges all the time without prior court order. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Boulay.
Thank you, President. We find that there is no legal base for this type of insinuation. This is why we are proposing the rejection of the amendment. Thank you.
The committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 3 is rejected. Amendment number 4. I call Mrs. Dunia Simonovic-Bratic to support amendment number 4. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. Kosovo's potential membership would be a reward for doing nothing from all aspects of obligations that they signed. And if you support them, the stabilization would occur on that territory. There will be no dialogue with Serbian community. Kurti will feel stronger than ever, and he will just continue terror towards Serbian community. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Bulai, 30 seconds.
Thank you, President. We don't find relevant this comparison as we are speaking exclusively of the accession of a country to the Council of Europe, not to references that should not include other international organizations. Therefore, we are against this amendment.
The committee rejected this amendment with a 2/3 majority, and I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment number 4 is rejected. Going on to amendment number 5, I call Mrs. Dunia Simonovic-Bratic to support amendment number 5. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. This is the core amendment. If you let them in the Council of Europe before the establishment of the Association of the Serbian Municipalities, they will never establish it. They are rewarded for doing nothing. This will ruin all dialogue that ever existed, and for Serbian people, this will be a red alert to run from that territory in the sake of saving their bare lives. Thank you.
Mr. Zwabe has asked to speak against the amendment. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. So what is really very interesting is that with this amendment, you accept that the Council of Europe can have an influence on the human rights situation and the situation of rule of law in Kosovo. This is very interesting, and I welcome this very much. But for sure, we start now everything. We reached something already with the ministry, and we want to go for more. But this should not be a precondition for the Committee of Ministers. So we are against this amendment.
The committee rejected this amendment with a 2/3 majority, and I now call for the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment number 5 is rejected. Going on to amendment number 13. I call Mrs. Elisabetta Gardini to support amendment 13. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, President. I would like to draw your attention to this amendment. This follows on from my statement. We just want to underline that at a moment when we're telling Kosovo that they can become a member of the Council of Europe, that they have a commitment into which they've just already entered, needs to be done as quickly as possible. That is to say, this association of Serb-majority municipalities, it seems to me to be something that would move us in favour of dialogue. Thank you.
To speak against the amendment, Mr. Stier, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, Mr. President, this is an issue that is already covered in the opinion, and the rapporteur has explained it in detail in her remarks. The amendment is not in line with the rapporteur's explanation and the position. That's why it has been rejected by a 2/3 majority in the committee and should be rejected also now.
The committee has said has rejected the amendment with a 2/3 majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 13 is rejected. Amendment 15. I call Mrs. Dunia Simonovic-Bratic to support Amendment 15. You have 30 seconds. Sorry. Mrs. Kovacs, you will...
Thank you. Actually,
okay.
Mr. President, I would take over if you allow me. As the rapporteur said, and we could hear today, this report is without defining the status or statehood of Kosovo, as it was said. So, therefore, we agree that it is important international treaties, possible commitments here from the report, but it would be important to insert a paragraph, and the main part of the paragraph is that everything is without prejudice of the international legal status of Kosovo and Metohija as a territory under international administration and as a part of Republic of Serbia. So it would be in line with the rapporteur's opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boulay has asked to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We make a very clear distinction of the word status and statehood, and we operate now with the understanding of an independent state, not dealing with a part of another state. So this is why we strongly oppose this amendment. Thank you.
The committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 15 is rejected. Amendment number 9. I call Mrs. Dunja Simonovic-Bratic to support amendment number 9. You have 30 seconds.
If it is possible. Dear colleagues,
Mrs. Kovacs, okay.
Thank you. As we all know, the Committee of Ministers asked for our opinion of the recommendation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and the decision will be final, as we could hear, at the Committee of Ministers. But anyway, we would like to put here that the Assembly recommends that the Committee of Ministers postpone its decision on the application of membership and until the United Nations Security Council finally determines or endorses the status of Kosovo and Metohija. It would be extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valbe. You have asked to speak against.
And we strongly recommend the opposite. So the Committee of Ministers asked us for our opinion. We will give our opinion now, I think with a quite clear majority. We asked the Committee of Ministers to react on this as soon as possible, and this is in May, so with a very vast majority we were against this amendment.
I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The amendment 9 is rejected. Amendment number 14. I call Mrs. Elisabetta Gardini to support amendment 14. You have 30 seconds.
Yes. I'd also like to present a sub-amendment, but addressing the amendment, this is yet again the same issue of underlining the implementation of the Brussels and Ohrid agreements, including the establishment of the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. These are agreements which have been entered into, and there is an agreement on it, and therefore it's important, I think, to underline this. Thank you.
Speak against.
Yes, President. Again, this is an issue that is covered in the opinion. The rapporteur has explained in detail how to proceed on this. This amendment is not in line with the rapporteur's explanation and position. That's why it has been rejected by a two-thirds majority in the committee and should be rejected now.
As Mr. Stier said, the committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. Amendment 14 is rejected. Amendment number 10, I call Mrs. Dunja Misimonovic-Pratic to support amendment number, Mrs. Kovacs.
Thank you,
We hear
Mr.
you.
President. There is no point of agreements if we don't force them to be implemented. So we agree with this really good paragraph, but at the end of it, we would like to add a really good sentence, and which is logical, that the Assembly invites the Committee of Ministers to ensure that Kosovo acts in accordance with the agreement on regional representation and cooperation reached back in 2012 under the European Union Facilitated Dialogue and fully implements the agreements reached under the EU Facilitated Dialogue. I know that the others would say it's not important, but how can it be not important? If we speak about the European integration of Kosovo and Western Balkans, just think about it. It's not logical. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boulay. You have asked to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I not find logical at all is some Serbian MPs feeding with hate the anti-EU speech at home day by day, and then referring to a solution offered now. So I totally reject this as I see it as a sign of lack of consequence for the matter of this file. Thank you.
The committee rejected this amendment with a 2/3 majority, and I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. Amendment 10 is rejected. Amendment number 6, I call Mrs. Kovacs. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am really shocked with Mr. Bulay's reaction, but because I am definitely not anti-European. I am the chair of the European Integration Committee, and I'm really trying to speak sophisticatedly here, you must admit. And at least I'm standing. Please, everybody, people cannot hear you, but just to explain, here again, statehood and status. So we asked at least to change the word. There was no understanding for the Serbian delegation, therefore we ask for the deletion of this paragraph. Thank you.
Who wishes to speak against? Mr. Boulay.
Well, for the same reasons, there's no need to explain the difference between status and statehood. So let us be reasonable this evening. Otherwise, we are hilarious. Thank you.
Sorry.
But I should stand up, no.
I'm trying to do it as fast as I can without undermining the procedure. So, the committee rejected this amendment with a 2/3 majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 6 is rejected. Amendment 7. I call Mrs. Kovacs.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is really interesting that we spoke here officially that it's not about the status. So if some of the countries or member states hasn't recognized Kosovo yet, but this paragraph would suggest, nevertheless, you must, how it is formulated here, irrespective of the position, we should behave like everything is okay. So as you could hear in the speech of my colleagues, you don't care about Serbia, so the Serbian MPs will be forced to leave this assembly. And for me, it is extremely difficult. So please, it's really not a win-win situation. Please think about it carefully. We suggested the deletion of this paragraph.
Thank you, Mrs. Kovacs. Does anyone wish to speak against Mr. Zwabe?
We want to monitor the situation of people in the bigger Europe. This is the aim. not that anybody should leave. We have a very clear text, and this is nothing, again, about the status. I think the rapporteur made it very clear. It's about human rights and how we can monitor it, and so for sure we should vote against this amendment.
The committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority, and I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 7 is rejected. Amendment 8. I call Mrs. Kovacs.
Thank you, distinguished President. Since it is obvious that the colleagues are not ready to listen other opinions, and these were the most important paragraph, and we suggested deletion of it. It is interesting that during this debate, which lasted thankfully more than 2 hours, we haven't heard how does it come that the rapporteur hasn't managed to go to Belgrade, and the Political Affairs Committee had the authorization of her visit to Belgrade. It is interesting, you finished everything in 1 year, missing the capital of Serbia. So please, Mr. Schwab and others, do not try to convince me that it is for the sake of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kovacs. Mr. Schwab will speak against.
Interestingly, the rapporteur was in Belgrade and each and everywhere, and she really tried to do the best. She tried to make a balanced report. She was in Brussels each and everywhere. But again, this is the Council of Europe. This is about the question if we should monitor a part of this Council of Europe. Pierre-Alain Fredes showed the map. There is a grey part, and we want to give the right to 2 million people, including the Serb minority there. It's not about the status. So we should vote against this amendment.
The committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 8 is rejected. We now proceed to vote on the draft opinion contained in document 15/958 as amended. I remind you that it was not, it is a mistake. I remind you that a two-thirds majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The draft opinion is adopted. Dear colleagues, the Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. with the agenda which was approved on Monday. The sitting is adjourned.